The Bible tells of a woman who spent 12 years facing a battle alone. She had an illness that, in addition to causing pain, distanced her from the people around her. She sought help from various doctors, tried many treatments, but it seemed that nothing helped. On the contrary, her suffering only increased and her strength and hope were running out. Healing seemed like something very distant until one day she heard about Jesus, the man who performed miracles and changed lives. With unwavering faith, she made a courageous decision to risk everything just to touch the clothes of Jesus, believing that this simple touch could change her life forever. This is a story about a faith that overcomes obstacles, that shows the power of hope and perseverance. In this video, we will learn about this incredible story, understand how Jesus responded to this woman, and how a single touch brought about the longed-for healing. Stay until the end to hear this amazing story of true faith. At that time, the laws said that someone in this woman's condition was considered unclean. She was viewed with prejudice by the community and knew that whenever she went out, she had to keep her distance from people, avoiding physical contact. This made her increasingly isolated. Those going through the same situation were instructed to stay away, as anything they touched was also seen as unclean. This instruction is recorded in the Law of Moses, in Leviticus chapter 15, verses 25 and 27, where it is mentioned that people with this kind of problem should keep themselves separate, as the condition was seen as something unclean, both physically and spiritually. In addition to the physical suffering, she faced deep emotional pain. She couldn't be close to her family or friends, as her touch could make them unclean as well. Imagine the weight of not being able to hug those you love, of not being able to talk or participate in celebrations and festivities. She lived on the fringes of society, watching life pass by without having the chance to be part of it. It was a forced loneliness, a loneliness that no one else could truly understand. The Bible tells us that this woman, despite all her suffering, had not lost the will to fight. She sought help from many doctors, spending all she had. Even when it seemed that there was no way out, she kept trying. But instead of improvement, what she found was more pain and discouragement. Each attempt at healing only seemed to worsen her condition, and she began to feel that her illness was like a sentence for the rest of her life. Yet deep down, there was still a hope. She believed that healing was possible, that there could be a chance to start over. The years went by, but she did not give up. Each new day was a new chance, an opportunity to believe that somewhere there was someone who had the answer she was desperately seeking. Even in the midst of pain, her heart was still full of hope. This motivated her to seek help from any doctor she could find, regardless of how far away he might be. Determined, she spent the little she had on treatments that promised relief, but never brought the healing she hoped for. Each doctor she sought seemed to bring a new hope, a chance to free herself from that seemingly endless pain. But over time, reality became harsher. None of the treatments worked, and her condition only worsened. Instead of relief, she felt her body growing weaker and weaker. The hope that was once so strong began to seem distant. This cycle of hope and disappointment was exhausting. With each new attempt, she braced herself for the possibility of yet another disappointment. But even so, something within her made her believe, as if a silent voice in her heart was telling her not to give up and to try one more time. This desire to be healed and the strength to try everything showed the faith she had, a faith that didn't falter despite many disappointments. As Proverbs chapter 13 verse 12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life." For this woman, waiting was painful, but the dream of being healed was something worth fighting for. Even as she watched her health and her savings disappear, her heart still sought a way out. She kept a small flame of hope alive, even though that hope also brought pain and frustration. After so many years of trying without success, news began to spread throughout the region. A man named Jesus was performing miracles wherever he went. He healed the sick, made the blind see, freed the oppressed, and even raised the dead. People said, "Jesus is a man of God, capable of doing the impossible." For that woman, these stories seemed as much a miracle as a promise. Hearing about the healings sparked something in her heart, a small spark of hope she hadn't even known still existed. She knew she had tried everything she could, but perhaps this man named Jesus could do what no one else had managed to do. The Bible teaches us about the value of faith in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Faith is the certainty of what we hope for and the assurance of things we do not see. It was this faith that, even after so many years of disappointment and pain, kept hope alive in this woman's heart. With the few strength she still had, she decided she would seek out Jesus. It didn't matter what she had to face or how tired her body was. What mattered was that, for the first time in a long time, she had a direction, a reason to believe again. She knew, however, that reaching Jesus would not be easy. Besides her physical weakness, there was the weight of the stigma she carried. Because of her condition, she was seen as unclean, and people avoided even coming near her. Even so, she gathered all her courage, determined to ignore what people might think or say. She knew that to reach Jesus, she would have to go through the crowd and overcome the invisible barriers that society had imposed on her. Deciding to go to Jesus was an act of courage and faith. She was not certain that she would be healed, but she felt that he was her only hope. Reaching Jesus seemed like a journey full of obstacles. He was surrounded by a huge crowd, all wanting to see him, hear his words, and perhaps receive a blessing. Jesus was someone special, and many had already felt his power. Weak and worn out, the woman knew that entering the middle of that crowd would not be easy. Each step made her more tired, but something inside her urged her not to give up. She needed to get closer somehow. As she moved forward, she felt the judgmental glances. Everyone there knew her condition and knew that, according to the laws of the time, she shouldn't be among them. The law of Moses said that a woman in her situation could not touch anyone, as this would make the other people unclean as well. She knew that by entering the crowd, she was breaking a rule and defying a tradition that had isolated her for so many years. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. After 12 years of suffering, she knew deep in her heart that Jesus was her last hope. Her faith was so great that she thought, "If I only touch his clothes, I will be healed." It was a simple thought, but full of strength. She didn't need Jesus to look at her or speak to her. For her, just a touch was enough, a brief contact with his garments, and her life would change. This faith was what kept her going, despite the crowd around her. With effort, she kept trying to get closer, and then she saw him. Jesus was just a few steps away. Her heart raced, and she stretched out her hand, touching the edge of his clothes with all the hope she had. In an instant, something incredible happened. She felt her body change, and the pain that had been with her for so long disappeared. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she was healed. The hemorrhage, which had been her constant companion and her greatest battle, stopped completely. There was no more pain nor that weakness that had dominated her for so long. For the first time in years, her body felt renewed, as if all that struggle had never existed. She knew, without any doubt, that she was healed. What no one had been able to do, Jesus accomplished without even a direct touch. It was her faith that reached his power. She felt a profound relief, something that seemed impossible until that moment. Tears began to run down her face, now not from sadness, but from gratitude and peace. There, her faith proved to be the path to healing, confirming what Jesus would later say, "Everything is possible for the one who believes." Mark chapter 9, verse 23. In that touch, her faith connected with Jesus' power, and the impossible happened. Amid all that movement, Jesus suddenly stopped. The crowd, curious, also stopped, and a silence took over everyone. With a keen look, he turned and asked, "Who touched me?" The disciples, hearing the question, were surprised because there was a crowd around him, all pressing in to get close. It was nearly impossible for someone not to bump into Jesus, given the number of people around him. Peter, one of the disciples, not fully understanding the question, commented, "Master, the crowd presses and crowds around you, and you ask, 'Who touched me?'" Luke chapter 8, verse 45. But Jesus knew that touch was different. He felt something special. It hadn't been just an ordinary bump. Someone had touched him with faith, seeking a miracle. Jesus sensed this because he felt that power had gone out from him. That touch was unique, a silent plea that went straight to his heart. As the people around looked on, curious, trying to understand what was happening, the woman, now healed, realized she could no longer hide. She knew what had happened within her, and that her healing came through that simple touch. Trembling not from fear, but from the emotion of the moment, she approached Jesus. Each step reflected her reverence and gratitude, and when she reached him, she knelt down and told everything. With a voice full of emotion, the woman told Jesus and everyone there what had happened. She spoke about her years of suffering, how she had tried everything, spending all she had without finding a cure. Then she shared her faith. She believed that by touching Jesus' clothes, she would be healed. Grateful, she could barely believe that at last she was free from that illness. The crowd listened in silence. Some looked at her in surprise, others with compassion. But the eyes of Jesus reflected only understanding and love. In that simple confession, all the pain and struggle of that woman became evident, and her faith was witnessed by everyone there. The attitude of Jesus showed that he saw into people's hearts. He knew that touch came from someone desperate, yet full of faith. And in that moment, his presence brought healing, restoring not only the body, but also the dignity and hope of a woman who had lived on the margins of society for so long. When Jesus looked at that woman kneeling before him, he didn't see just someone seeking physical healing. He saw deeper into her heart, where the pain, the losses, and the hopes of an entire life were held. In his gaze, there was compassion, a love that understood all she had gone through, all the tears and silent prayers that no one else had heard. With a gentle and tender voice, Jesus said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be free from your suffering." By calling her daughter, he did much more than heal her. He welcomed her, giving her worth and dignity that she hadn't experienced for years. For that woman, hearing the word daughter was like receiving the deepest embrace she had ever imagined. Jesus treated her as someone he loved and respected. With a single word, he completely transformed her life. These words of Jesus not only confirmed her physical healing, but also freed her from the emotional and spiritual burden she had carried. For years, she had lived isolated and rejected, seen by society as someone unclean and without hope. In that moment, Jesus restored everything in her life. He didn't just heal her body, but also brought peace to her soul, something she had sought for so long. By saying, "Go in peace," Jesus gave her a gift as valuable as the healing, a new life. This peace meant she could go back to living among people without fear or shame. Her condition had changed, and now she could walk in the community and touch people without anyone pulling away. It was a peace that broke down all barriers, giving her back her dignity and worth as a daughter of God. These words of Jesus impacted not only her physical and emotional state, but also her spirit. He gave her a new perspective on her worth and who she truly was. In that moment, she understood that she was not just a healed woman, but someone of great faith, recognized by the very Son of God. Her suffering was now part of a past that no longer defined her. Jesus brought healing, freedom, and a new identity. With a light heart and full of gratitude, she could stand up, knowing she was completely restored. This story, which we find in Mark chapter 5, verse 34, is a powerful example of how faith can make the impossible possible, showing that the love and compassion of Jesus bring true healing. Write in the comments if you enjoyed this story, share it with more people, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel to follow the next videos. May God bless your life.